Hey everyone, and welcome back to High Energy Podcast. My name's Esteban Gast. I am thrilled and excited and ready to be talking to our next guest. This podcast is for people living in Southern California, although everyone is welcome to listen. But if you're in Southern California, you know one of the biggest climate stories the last year have been the fires and natural disasters. And today we're going to have a conversation with someone who thinks through this a lot. And I can't wait to get into it, to know like how we can prepare as people, as a city, as a community. So I'm so thrilled to have this conversation. We've got Nina Knierim, and she is the California Area Manager for Community and Disaster Resilience at Community Organized Relief Effort, also known as CORE. And we're going to get into that. So please welcome to High Energy, Nina Knierim.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate being here.
Nina, I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you.
We're going to talk about a lot, but I kind of want to start and ground us in your lived experience of this past year, which is unfortunately a lot of other people's lived experience, but you lost your home in the Palisades fire.
That's correct.
Yeah. What is it like to be working in the role that you're working and having faced that personal experience? Like, how are you making sense of
it
this?
all?
Yeah,
That's a good question.
I'm
not really making any sense of it all at all.
Yeah.
However, I am grateful for a lot of things. One of the things that we as a family try and do is take account of the things that are good in our life, right? I embarked on the professional career in climate and disaster resilience about 5 or 6 years ago. Prior to that, I was a corporate attorney, also did some immigration law. And prior to that, I worked in technology. So I've had kind of like several different careers throughout my life. But as a lawyer, I just realized that I wasn't making the kind of impact I wanted. The immigration system is broken. That was very, very difficult to walk away from. But it was the first Trump presidency. And so it was, I just knew that there were something else out there for me. And COVID obviously came and went and just really changed my perspective on the world, what my part was in the world, and wanting to make a better place for my kids. Like, first and foremost, I didn't want my kids to have to grow up in a world where they were fearful and anxious all the time. That's why I chose preparedness, really, and skipped right over sort of emergency preparedness because, there are EMTs and first responders. But this is a sort of a new professional field. Those that are not first responders, those that are not actually going through the rubble, but those that are out there in the community, that are part of the community, explaining to people how to prepare themselves for whatever hazard is in their, orbit or their family's orbit. Because of my job, and especially wildfires. Wildfires are very common here in California. As part of the last 4 or 5 years, I've been working across the state with Fire Safe Council specifically, and working to get grant money from both the state and the federal government to assist with targeted outreach and education, right? First and foremost, even though we know there are wildfires, there's a lot of complacency, even in the mountains, even in the rural areas where the wildfires are very frequent. But they are too experiencing increase in frequency and an increase in intensity. We're matching it with firepower, no pun intended there. But the responsibility has shifted, and maybe it was always on us. The first responders were there. It didn't happen as often, once in a lifetime, once in 100 years, whatever kind of description. But I knew myself that, hey, if something happens, like how fast is somebody actually going to get to us? And it's a very good question. And so I started doing a little more digging. I watched some YouTube videos, like big preppers out there. I'm not a prepper, but I am prepared. So I think that's a different sort of way to look at it. And I'm not your sort of typical, whatever homesteader, off the grid type person.
Yeah.
I'm a soccer mom. I have 2 kids and a husband and a dog. I try to live my life sustainably, not perfect, but I've sort of chosen my lane, which is preparedness. And because of the fires and what happened that morning, I know for a fact that this is my purpose. And it has definitely changed something in me. There's a little bit of guilt, too, with having all of the information that I had. And it's free and it's out there.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm, paid for it or anything. It's out there. And that's what we do on a day-to-day basis at CORE is we go out to communities, we go out to senior centers, we go out to schools. There's no age group that's too young to talk to about this. And I think people are starting to realize that, you cannot, I don't know what it is, just keep this under wraps, if you will, and sort of talking to your family members, your children, your church, your school about what do we do together? How are we going to let each other know when something happens? I always say one action that you can take is just knock on your neighbor's door.
Yeah.
Even if you met them once 10 years ago, just knock on their door again. Just say, hey, I'm here. You're here. You know who I am. We can exchange phone numbers just in case anything happens. And you'll be surprised. Like people are very open to that, even if they're not the kind of neighbors that wave hi and, invite you over for a barbecue.
Yeah.
And LA is notorious for not talking to anybody except for the people they know. So yeah, people can live in their apartment building for years and never meet their neighbors. Those times are past. We have to know our neighbors. We have to know our community because as budget cuts happen, as intensity and frequency happens, our cities, our emergency management departments, our police departments, and our fire departments are all short-staffed, period. Nobody is at full capacity. Some are worse than others. So the stories that you hear in the headlines, specifically, what happened recently in Texas, the problems with like alert systems and things like that, that's not just in Texas. That's everywhere.
Yeah.
Every single city has some sort of archaic historical system, infrastructure in place that needs to be updated in order to save lives, period.
When you say, oh, all the information is out there, like it does, to me, it feels like that's true, right? It's almost like we don't need more information.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is that gap? Maybe even like we can reflect on our own experiences, like in your experience and or like that at a city-wide level of like, we kind of know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not ready or we don't know. Yeah, we don't take those steps. What do you think is that causes that gap?
We live in a very stable, very, safe in city, generally speaking, we do. And so if your day-to-day is not about true struggling, a roof over your head, food on the table, transportation, some sort of income, to take care of yourself and your family. Those are the people who really don't have access to the information and is why we spend a lot of time in disadvantaged communities, especially in multiple different languages. We present the information in all languages because the belief that our first responder systems, the hospitals, the airports, like I said, the police departments, fire departments, city government have been warned. We've all been warned. And it is happening much faster than we anticipated, right?
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of governments and a lot of people in general think that we've got more time. And some people do have more time. But it's not more time to wait to get ready. It's more time to get ready.
Yeah.
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 And so when I talked about like feeling guilty about having the information that I had, it was because I wanted to, in that moment when we were in evacuation mode, I was ready with about 15, 20 minutes to spare, just given I had a lot of tools. I had Watch Duty app, which a lot of people now have. I had the radar open. I had wind speeds open. I had my wildland firefighter on the phone.
Oh my gosh, you're ready to go.
Yeah, he works for me. And so, I was like, I need you to tell me what's going on because right now I'm getting my family and everybody set. And so, did all the research for me and then sent me a text and let me know exactly what was happening. In that moment, I get my kids out, my husband out, I've got my dog, and there were specifically 5 houses around me that I wanted to get to just because I knew the age of the people that were living there because I knocked on their door, said hi. I knew that there was a woman with some special needs kids and a couple of big dogs at another corner. And I knew that the woman taking care of children next door spoke Spanish, and she probably had no idea what was going on. Even if she had alerts, they're not in Spanish, and so the likelihood, just like other people within the Palisades fire area, and same with the Eaton fire, had a few extra minutes because I was able to knock on their door. That is so critical, right?
Yeah.
So critical, especially when you get to a point where people were jumping out of their cars, fleeing the flames, themselves. And even as I was driving out of the house, I put my Corps hat on, so I looked like I was some person of authority, and I said, I'm your neighborhood, emergency response team member, please, listen to me, put your phones down. Everybody was like filming, get your kids, get your dog, get your important papers, and you need to leave now. Most people heeded the warning. Most people were sort of like, oh, maybe this is somebody who actually knows what's happening. Others, not so much. And you can only do what you can do. And, leaving a family standing on their roof, just pointing at the flames coming their way is a really difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
But again, is it my responsibility, to knock some common sense into a person? No, it's not. And so that's what I'm trying to put forward, is this real responsibility to educate yourself and your family and be prepared for anything that comes our way. Civil unrest. We had, the protests and things that got out of hand, and obviously a whole lot of other things happen in our city. Power outages. Those can happen just on a windy day. You can be out of power for 12 hours,
Yeah.
So those are things that may not cross our minds as being an emergency or disaster, but they are disruptions.
Yeah.
And you can prepare for disruptions too.
What are ways that people can, I know part of this is when we'll link to resources and things like that. But even conversationally, what are ways that people can start to think about that, right?
Yeah.
They're probably listening and going, oh my gosh, super good point.
Right.
I haven't thought about
that.
Blank.
That.
What are ways for them to start thinking through this?
Right. Here's where I kind of depart a little bit from some of the materials that we hand out. And there's no right way. I have my own experience. And so I want to share why I think having an evacuation plan is more important than having a go bag. Because in the middle of the night, when you're woken up by an alert or a knock at the door, even if you can't find your go bag, having a way to get out, having a way to notify your family, having a meetup spot, knowing what is the best way to exit your neighborhood, what is the thoroughfare out. That's what I would say is the most important thing. Second to that, and probably right on par, is having the bag. And the bag can be anything. It can be a suitcase, it can be a duffel, it can be, a professionally, stacked stealth angel backpack. But really, your family, your safety, the critical and complex environment that just blows up around you is so overwhelming that it is very difficult to think in that moment where to go and what to do. Even I, as a professional, and am teaching this, daily, I had to stop and think and breathe and then go through the steps that I knew. I even referenced a card that I have,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I need to do this. I need to do that.
Because in those moments, people freeze up or they just make decisions that aren't that
You
right.
get flooded.
Yeah.
You get flooded with, I know there's some medical terms for it.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what it is. But you're in that fight or flight mode. Right. And it does make it extremely difficult to think through actions or think through next steps or who you need to contact or reach out to.
So it's like preparing, being like,
mentally preparing.
I'm going to assume in this situation, I won't be thinking my best.
Exactly.
And I won't remember my parents' phone number.
Right.
Because
And your cell phone might not be working.
Yeah.
That's the other thing that people found in, specifically in Palisades, is I couldn't, for instance, call out. I kept getting a busy signal, but people could call me and I could text. So, what do? You're driving, you want to call people. The only way I could do it was to text. So what I did is I texted my sister-in-law and I said, hey, she's out of town. Let everybody know in the family, we're okay. We're okay. We're evacuating. We can't answer any calls. We can't answer any texts right now. So preparing your sort of like your evacuation plan, which includes a communication plan, which includes like, where are we going to go next? Are we going to go to, our grandma's house? Are we going to go to Bob's if they're available? And then you have to do that for each place you might be. So work, school, on vacation. A lot of people were on vacation. Who do you contact? Do you have your neighbor's number? So again, talking about this community resilience is so important. And it's not just in the aftermath. You hear the resilience piece so often. It's like, oh, we came back. We're going to come back stronger than ever. My definition of resilience is before it happens and learning from what happened. That is building resilience. That is building strength. That's building empowerment, fortitude, and lessening fear and anxiety. Because once you know what it is, it does seem less scary. And for me, I know that's the truth.
It feels like so much of that to prepare now is of course these like tangible steps, and also kind of what you're saying of like get to know your neighbors, community, plan that it feels like that's a starting point. I'm curious how, in terms of your job and the organization that you're working for, like, is that messaging like, is it just like get to know your neighbors? Like that feels tough, right? It feels almost unrelated. If someone's saying, hey, we're talking about wildfires.
Yeah.
What do you mean get to know my neighbor?
My neighbor, exactly.
Do you find like resistance to that? Like, do you find that it's that people are like, what do you mean? I got my go bag.
Mm-hmm.
Or it almost feels like, oh, we're over here solving this problem, but we're starting, and this problem is like over here, but we're starting over here in a totally different spot.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, hey, a block party where you all exchange your numbers will help you be more resilient in the face of emergencies.
Absolutely, 100%.
Do you see people connecting that? Do you see, what is it like to say that? Because even me talking it out with you now, I'm like, oh, it's almost funny for me to go home after this podcast and be like, to my wife and be like, babe, we got to make a group chat.
Yeah, we got it.
I just talked to, one of them, someone who thinks about this all the time. And let's go knock on some neighbors' doors. And my wife is so lovely, she wouldn't, but I could see someone being like, what do you mean? We got the go bag. Yeah. My parents live an hour away. We're fine. Do you find that? Or is that could be just Esteban, me, in my own head as I'm thinking through it?
It's not just you. Not just you, right? And kind of, as I mentioned before, community as like a nationwide U.S. specific thing has changed over time. And we saw that too, recently with COVID. There was a lot of community that came together. There were a lot of people working together who hadn't before. A lot of people volunteering, talking, figuring out ways to keep life moving forward when we were, in this very uncertain time. That's where we are now. We are in a very uncertain time. We don't know what's going to happen next. We think we do, right? But, sadly, we don't. It is okay to make light of the situation and put some humor in there because it's approachable. I'm not telling you this is what you should do and you're going to die if you don't have your evacuation plan. But what I am saying is, hey, wouldn't you like to be just a little better prepared when something does happen? For your kids, like it's your responsibility as a parent to make sure your kids are safe. Because if you're at home with your go bag and you've got your alerts, you're fine, right? Knock on your neighbor's door. But if you're at work, your cat's in your apartment, oh, hey, I'm going to call Esteban. He's got my number. And I know where my key is hidden for my other cat lady who's not there today.
Yeah.
Please go save my cat. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, Nina, on this podcast, we've talked a lot about sustainability in terms of like clean tech incubators and innovation and the grid and amazing technology. And we've thought a lot about that. Let's say that this thought of like sustainability and technology and solutions. How does that interplay or relate with something like climate preparedness or climate resiliency?
The importance is the same, right? There, when we talk about our energy, whether it's clean energy, fossil fuels, our grid, our infrastructure, the things and the decisions and the policies, the regulations will impact the preparedness and the resilience of our communities. 100%. Everything from like having grids that won't go down in a windstorm or a lightning storm, and that will continue to have power, that they don't go out and we are suffering through a power outage that doesn't really need to happen. We have the technology to do that. There's a lot of innovation that's happening out in the world. I think finally we're like moving some of those innovators, some of that money, some of the idea making to this route and to this purpose, because people are feeling vulnerable, right? And you've got the people with the money and the knowledge and the science and the data are feeling vulnerable themselves. And that's really what it's taking to move the needle in things like energy. It's a behemoth. You like it, you're just not just going to move it forward. It's going to take a lot of work on all levels of government, community.
Okay, we're going to go to guest questions.
Okay.
Or I'm sorry, to listener questions for you, the guest. So in some ways, guest questions. So these, I haven't seen this before, so we'll talk through them and let's do it. Here's the first question from someone named Robert. Oh, this is awesome. Can you talk about climate disasters from an immigration perspective?
Oh, that
feels like someone read your bio and was like, these are connected. That's an incredible question. Yeah. Can you talk about what that looks like, climate disasters from an immigration perspective?
Absolutely. I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier. There's a bunch of different alerts that go out, some from FEMA, some from your local police department or sheriff's department, some from the local fire department. Not all of them are in multiple languages. And if they are, maybe Spanish. English isn't your first language. You're probably working really hard. You probably don't have your cell phone open because you don't use it for your job. And I'm just saying sort of like a typical immigrant family here in Los Angeles. Since they are our target audience in a lot of the communities that we go to, we think about this a lot. And where it sort of crosses is not just from a language standpoint. There's distrust, in our government, and people are feeling unsafe now more than ever from an immigrant standpoint. So when you say, hey, this emergency preparedness or emergency resilience hub is open, at City Hall or at, just making like the library, whatever, some government building, more than likely people are not going to go there. So the information that we're providing is even more critical to them, because it's like they have to be ultra prepared because their choices are limited as to what they can do during a situation. And those fears are, in a situation like that, maybe unfounded, maybe not. We've seen a disastrous, process and policy with regards to immigration right now. That coupled with this time that we're in from a preparedness standpoint means that they are significantly at a disadvantage. And it's one of the reasons why I have been so happy and excited to have this other platform, thank you again, is that the more people like us who are prepared, then we can assist others. When I talked about the nanny, next door, I had to speak to her in Spanish to tell her exactly what was happening and exactly what to do. My Spanish isn't perfect, but she got the gist of it. And then I told her specifically what to do. I know that made a huge difference to her specifically. Somebody cared enough to come over to tell her what was going on in her native language so that she could make a life and death decision about the child that she was taking care of.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
That is. That's a really beautiful thought that when you are prepared and you're ready, then you can be a resource to others. You're like a library for others.
Exactly.
We're on to our last question.
Okay.
Here we go. It's from someone named Chad. This is honestly a wonderful place to end the podcast. Is there a story that you look to for hope when it comes to how people are able to manage climate disasters? Chad, thank you for submitting this. Perfectly timed at the end. We've talked a lot about heavy things, as we should. We need to have the conversations. But is there a story? Can you think of a particular story that's hopeful of these people got it right? They were prepared. They were ready to rock.
Yeah. A really, really close to my heart story. I mentioned earlier in the podcast about the first fire that I had experienced when I was at Corps and how that mobilization happened. A year later, it was called the McKinney Fire, and it went through an area called the Klamath River community. It took everything with it. The entire community was gone. That was one of the first, you call a burn scars that I'd ever been through. And it was, like I said, about close to a year after the fire. But it still was almost like a graveyard. You went through and there were still burnt out cars and fireplaces and frames of doors. But the person who was driving us through the burn scar was a fire survivor. And so he and his wife were talking about the post office used to be, the community center used to be here. Joe used to be there. Our house was on the hill. Thankfully, we were okay. And I told him, I was like, whatever I can do, whatever we can do, we'll be back. We didn't have any money at the time to help that community. But I knew as part of my job was to continue to get more resources and more money to help communities like this, either rebuild or prepare for the next thing. And they're no stranger. They were no stranger to fires. A year after that, they finally got their emergency declaration. It didn't come until way after, even though they'd lost many lives and many structures. I don't know the rhyme or reason to that either. We were invited back for the raising of their community center. It was 107 degrees. So I can't say that it was pleasant, but the smiles and the joy on that community's face just for erecting a community center says to me, like, hey, we're all going to be okay. We're all going to be okay. The knowledge that my happiness, my strength, whatever it is I have, doesn't come from my stuff or my clothes or my shoes or my car. I wished I could have saved all my books. That's something that I miss. But you know what? Yeah. People have been giving us books. So that's really something that sticks in my mind because, driving through my own burn scar and seeing my own ashes, I was like, you know what? I'm not the first person to experience this. I'm not going to be the last. And I've learned from this, and I'm going to do whatever I can to spread that message.
Nina, thank you so much for being here, sharing your stories about resiliency, about how we can all think about things that sometimes aren't that nice to think about, but we must think about. Thanks for even I feel like that's even a challenge to be have uncomfortable conversations, if that's with yourself on how to be prepared or your family, or if that's saying hi to a neighbor. I keep going back to this idea that I'm like, oh man, it begins with there. Neighbor phone number exchange.
That's right.
That's so great. Thank you for being on the podcast. And thank you for watching and listening. And we love these questions. I love that last one from Chad, especially. And you can send us your questions anytime you want at highenergypodcast@SoCalRent.org. And we can place it with a relevant guest or whatever that looks like. But we want to make sure that your voice is being heard as well and your stories are being told. That is it. We're going to mention, put all the resources that we talked about and stuff that you're working on in Core. And I know you talked about a lot about sharing information. We're going to put all of that in the description of the podcast. So all the resources will be there. And that is it. We hope you subscribe and leave a review, a positive review, dare I say. And that's it. Thank you for tuning in to High Energy Podcast. We hope to see you soon and keep having meaningful and important conversations and doing meaningful and important work. We'll see you next time.